When he turned his back from shoulder to shoulder, it looked like as wide as the tailgate of a truck.
And just darkness, literal darkness, just came like all over, just all over me except where I was standing.
This thing let out the most blood-curdling, mind-blowing, spine-tingling scream that you've ever heard in your life, and it cut through me like a knife.
And I knew that they were going to take me. I just knew it. And then the next thing I can remember is being levitated.
Well, when I look in there, I see two big eyes staring back at me.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night.
Hey there, believers. I got a great episode for you today. I'm bringing back a very popular guest from season 3. It's Travis. He has a huge account on social media of Giants of Ancient America. We're going to bring Travis back on. We're going to dig back into Giants again, talk about some of his favorite accounts, some of his research that he's done. If you want to hear the first episode that he was on, I had him on Season 3, Episode 20. It was back in May of last year. It's been almost a full year. Insanely popular episode. Had a huge response to it. Thousands of downloads for that episode. Because we're all interested in this, right? Who are the Giants? Where'd they come from? Are they a giant race of Native Americans here? Were they, is it biblical? Or did they all just have some kind of genetic disorder, gigantism, or were they possibly descendants of, the Nephilim, or a giant race, a biblical race? So there's tons of those questions, and Travis has always done a great job of, digging through all that stuff, and he's very open to share his research with us here. So I'm excited about that. If you want to hear some more of Travis's interviews, he was on Blurry Creatures, I think at the very beginning of their show, like episodes 5 and 6 or something like that. So I think everybody at this point listens to Blurry Creatures. So just dig through their old content and you can find Travis there. Again, his Instagram is Giants of Ancient America. So go check that out after you listen to this show. All right, let's go ahead and bring Travis on. I'm super excited to go ahead and get started. All right. Did you get the notification? All right.
Yep.
Travis, thank you so much for coming back on the show. I love talking about Giants, and I think you love Giants. So
Yes, it's good to be back. I always enjoy. I say I always. I've only been on your show once, but it was a blessing and an honor to be on your show, and I really enjoyed it, and I always look back on it as a good time.
Well, thank you.
So,
I appreciate that. And you were on Blurry Creatures too, right? Like in the early days.
I was, episode 5 and 6. Yeah.
I love those guys.
Yeah, they're getting deep over there.
Yeah, man.
On all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it's quite the journey.
Yeah, they messaged me like a year ago before they exploded. They're like, brother, we got to do something soon. I was like, yeah, man, I'm all about it. And then now I'm messaging them, hey, we need to do something. Don't forget.
Dude, I know, right? Yeah. Well, I think what it is just they've gotten so busy. It's like you start losing time of the day.
Yeah.
And so I'll call him up every once in a while and we'll chat. But, it's tough. He's busy. I'm busy. I know he's more busy than I am because he's doing a podcast and all that stuff. That's a lot harder to do than what I do. because I can sit behind my computer, I can do the research. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is taking some time to create, have it to where I have to edit these because you can't read them all the time. So each newspaper article I edit to where it's like you have to highlight it or darken it and sharpen it. So and I try to make it fun some for the viewer. So it's just not always just a piece of paper you're looking at. Maybe throw an ancient skull kind of on it that kind of maybe came from the area, just for reference of what they look like.
Right.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
You have a very good approach to it. It like you say, it's not like looking at a paper, which for me, I'm in my 40s. I have no problem sitting there reading a paper. You know what I mean? But it does have that social media appeal. You've
Right.
captured that. So people are learning and they're digging in and they don't even realize,
Yeah.
It's great what you're doing.
I want it to look more like textbook looking stuff, even though what you're looking at is a newspaper clipping. It looks cool.
Right.
And, and I'm kind of working on a book right now to where I can put some of this stuff in a book to where you could visualize it like kind of like the site.
Nice.
So yeah,
Nice.
That's a work in progress though.
How close are we to this book, man? I didn't know that.
Oh, I may be about halfway, maybe a little over. I don't
Okay.
know. I started back in 2020, so it's just been plugging along. But you know what it is.
Yeah.
Day to day, you've got other things you've got to do, and of course, I'm still doing my research. That's the fun part.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I
And
have
you
a
don't
book.
want to rush it.
I got a book on my desktop that's been sitting there for about 2.5 years too, man.
Yeah.
I had a different job than what I do now. So I was outside and I was all about bushcraft and survival, wilderness training. And I worked in a state park.
Yeah.
So I had nothing but time, and I was out there. And so I started writing this book about a survival guide,
Yeah.
and I got it to where I was almost done and then just backburnered it and it sat there.
Yeah. Hey, it's still there though.
Yeah. Yeah. One of these days, maybe I can do it again.
You've already done the footwork.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Most of it's done.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I love it.
Giants. Before we started recording, you said that you had an account that you might have readily available about Giants in West Virginia. Is that?
Yes, I do. I have two of them in front of me.
Awesome.
And I can go over those real quick.
Yeah. I mean, if you have some place else you want to start at, that's totally fine.
No, let's do that. Let's do it.
Yeah, man.
Kind of whet the appetite here. This is from 1908, the Chicago Livestock World, West Virginia. Huntington, West Virginia. The municipal authorities of Central City, 4 miles west of here, 3 weeks ago, ordered the removal of a prehistoric mound from 13th Street. At a distance of 12 feet above the base of the mound, a gigantic human skeleton was discovered. The skeleton measured about 7 feet in length and was of massive proportions. It was surrounded by a mass of rude trinkets. 8 copper bracelets were discovered. These, when burnished, show the purest of beaten copper. There also are rude stone vessels, hatchets, and arrowheads. A curiosity inscribed totem was found at the head of the skeleton. The Smithsonian Institution will be notified of the discovery.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's in Huntington, West Virginia.
Yes.
Okay, that's Cabell County. That is about 60 miles, I'd say, from where I live at.
Okay.
That's pretty close to home.
It really is.
In fact, I am less than 2 miles from a mound that I didn't know existed until this year. There's a house. There's a house built on top of
it. Oh my. Well, you know what? When they did that, it might have helped preserve the mound because in this case, they were destroying the mound. They were removing it.
Yeah,
which I don't understand that.
They wiped out a lot of mounds, and I don't know. Do you speculate that there is a giant in each one of these mounds, or is it like just any kind of chief?
What was this? It was 12 feet down. Okay, so I've done research on mounds, and when Squire and Davis from the Smithsonian were coming through in the early days, they would dig into these mounds, and they would say a lot of times towards the top, it could be a prehistoric one, or it could be a Native American. So like the Native Americans kind of moved through into the area, and they would see it as a burial, and they would sometimes bury their dead on top of it.
On top.
But down towards the bottom, you have the big guys. And I don't know if it said in here, I thought he was around 7 feet.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, so he's not massive, right? He's pretty big. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, I've got accounts where they're, 10, 12 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
But he's still big, but a massive proportion. So not only is he 7 feet, his bone structure is dense. And a lot of times their jaws will slide over our faces of today.
Wow.
But yeah, to answer your question, a lot of times there are giants in these burial mounds.
Okay.
Because they were the mound builders.
Yes. Yeah.
And that mound building culture spread around the world. And from my research, they kind of spread around the world, starting like right south of the Caucasus Mountains, which is the Assyrian Empire. Yeah. And so from there, they spread west, and some of them went east along the Silk Road towards Japan, China. A lot of them ended down up in India, but many of them went to the west. As you can tell, they left a trail of burial mounds, temple mounds, right. Like I think it's Silbury Hill or Salbury Hill. I think I pronounced it wrong, but in England, it's a massive mound, and from my understanding, it's not a burial mound. It's a huge temple mound, worship mound.
Wow.
But yeah, they did that. They erected these standing stones, megalithic stones, burial mounds, cairns, for different reasons. Some are unknown, but they left a trailway as they went. And they also ended up in the United States. You can see the same type of, we could call it technology or traditions, in the United States as you see in the British Isles. So like Stonehenge, for example, people think of it as just the stones, which those are there, but the henge actually refers to the ditch around the stones.
Okay.
So the henge is the earthen ditch. And those are very common. And when I was investigating the mound it was called Saul's Mound in Tennessee, I believe that mound it's a temple mound. It's flat on top, and it's a worship mound. And it's around 70, 74 feet above the surrounding area. But I noticed as I was walking around it, there was a ditch. It wasn't there, like it wasn't super tall anymore, but there was a hinge around it, and I was looking around for literature on it, and there were no plaques about it. They didn't even know, but of course they didn't know to connect them with the same peoples that were moving through France, through the British Isles, into the United States, with the same customs.
Now, when they can go from the British Isles to the United States, let me ask a crazy question. Were these people seafaring, or are we talking so old that we're looking at possibly like the continent still touching, like a Pangea situation, and Scotland is part of the Appalachian chain,
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. My assumption is they were the seafaring ones because of the date. Spreading from the Assyrian Empire, when the Assyrian Empire fell around in the 600s BC.
Okay.
So like I know in the Bible it says in the days of Peleg that earth was divided, which seems to refer to the Pangea or whatever, when God moved the plates.
Right.
I would assume that's before. Now, while we're talking about this, that's not to say that some of these giants were from other times, like even more prehistoric times than what I'm referring to. Like a lot of these burial mounds, this is a group of people of common ancestry and common customs, and they just spread out. They didn't all go the same direction. So you see people today that are living in Easter Island, and they look very Irish, and they say, "But we're not from our." Well, they said they were from. They said they came from like Peru, which that's what the traditions state too. Like they came, and so are they descendants of some of these ancient mound builders? Possibly so. It's strange. And then you have Celtic mummies that are buried in the deserts of China, and they've unearthed these mummies, and they look very Caucasian, but they didn't come from Scotland. And so that does support the theory that they did come from this one central location and spread to the east and northwest, and with the similar customs.
Okay.
So, but there are older ones that seem to be around here too. Like, for instance, there's one in Tennessee. 19 feet down, they were digging a well, and they found this guy, and he was really tall. He was around, no, I want to say it was deeper than 19 feet. He was 19 feet tall is what it was.
Wow.
But they were digging a well, and he was encased in this strata that it seemed to be like he might have been buried alive. It wasn't a burial mound. So you have both here. You definitely have both here.
And that was in Tennessee?
That was pretty close to Nashville. Franklin, Tennessee is where that one was.
Oh, wow.
I don't have that one in front of me. I'm just going off my memory.
Yeah. Man. So, okay. I don't want to get in the habit of pushing things to fit my perspective.
Oh, no, go for
it. But if they're in this centralized location, sharing customs and traditions, and then for some reason they scatter, that sounds kind of like Babel, right?
Right. Yeah.
So do you think that the ancient origins of these giants, for you and from your research even, are we looking at like descendants of the Nephilim? Are we looking at those kind of like a biblical giant, like the Canaanites and the Moabites?
Yeah. I think they were, because what happened with the Assyrians, they would come down into the biblical land, which they were just north of it. I mean, you could really consider them part of it, but they were north. So you would have, they encompassed parts of Iran now, parts of Georgia, Armenia, but just right there at the base of the Caucasus Mountains. They would come down and they would just take over all these areas and subdue the people and remove the people and put them in their land, and they would mix it all up like that. And so that's where these people came from.
Wow.
And so, I mean, there's even the biblical text, and I think it's the book of Nahum. That's what the whole book is about. It refers to the fall of Nineveh, which Nineveh was the capital of Assyria. When you think of Nineveh, everybody thinks of the story of Jonah. But
right.
That's not what this is talking about. This is talking about the fall of Nineveh, and it refers. You can just read it. It says you have massed up your peoples. Like, they would take them and they would make them into merchants, and they would make these people be their fighters and do all the work for them.
Right.
But what happened is all those peoples became so great and so strong that eventually they turned inwards, and it created like a civil war type situation, and Nineveh fell. They stripped them clean, it says, and then they flew away like locusts, the Bible says. So, yeah, but see, here's the thing. Your modern academics aren't going to go make that connection, because they're not looking at at God's word at all.
Right.
And they could really care less.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's
that's why they don't get anywhere. That's why
that's true. That's true. Yeah, they need to turn to that. They need to turn to the Lord and and have an open mind.
Absolutely. It's like this is totally off the topic, but it's an example of academia just missing the mark just a little bit. I was talking about doing church lessons, teaching in church. I'm doing one this week, tomorrow. Actually, it's on love. So I'm getting in there, and the Bible tells you what love is, and they tells you 4 different types of love and all this stuff. I go to, like dictionary.com or whatever on my phone, and I type in what's the definition of love, and it tells me this really generic, 2 or 3 words. So I have to go, okay, what is the definition of fondness? And it's like a liking. Okay, what's the definition of a liking? And it's like a fondness, and it goes back. It's just like circular. It can't tell you how how you're moved by it, and it's the same thing with these giants. They're like
that's true.
Anomaly.
Yeah, and here's the thing: they don't even like academia doesn't even like to admit that they were a group of peoples,
right?
At all. So, so from there they spread, and obviously you could focus on the ones that spread to the east. I mean, I found accounts of them in Japan, and they're buried in burial mounds. And so, but obviously a lot of them went west. Probably more went westward. Celtic writers and poets, they refer to that. They refer to them being strong and mighty. So you could say their leaders were strong, mighty giants. And so here's the deal: they weren't all giants. So what I've come to in my conclusions is that the leading body of these peoples were giants.
Okay.
Because sometimes in burial mounds you have, like in Ireland, I have one. Let me pull it up.
Yeah.
Ireland, you've got a man who stood 10 feet tall. This is from 1914, the World's News. Laborers digging a foundation for cottages in County Louth unearthed 3 skeletons, apparently of prehistoric people, one of whom must have stood about 10 feet tall. The skull of the skeleton was entire and measured 18 inches from the crown to its chin, and the leg bones and teeth were abnormally large. The skeletons were in separate graves, but they were all buried, nearby, all prehistoric, but only one of them was a giant.
Yeah.
And so that seems to fit other accounts. It's like they weren't all tall, but there seemed to be a leading class. Like even in America, you've had just common graves. Like they would uncover like a cemetery people, but so they weren't all being buried in the mounds. It's almost like the elite were being buried in the burial mounds.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Maybe
so
a couple leaders or something.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yep. Chieftains and stuff, whatnot. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I know I asked you to tell me some of your favorites, but I'm before you get into that, I'm really interested in that other one from West Virginia you have there.
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
so
let's
in
do
love
that.
with my state. We're as bad as Texas when it comes to that. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, hey, I mean, when you think of this stuff and you think of the real history, the real ancient history,
yeah,
and maybe not so far ancient, but you kind of want to know what was going on around your area.
absolutely.
And so, I mean, I'm the same way with Texas because I'm right here in Texas, and so I have my eyes out when I go on hikes. I've actually discovered a megalith, that's not marked, just
in Texas.
Yeah. And I had a buddy tell me of one that when he was a kid, he's quite a bit older than me, but he said he heard of a stone that had been like a balanced stone, like a boulder, huge boulder that been balanced somewhere. And so you kind of think it's like, okay, there's some stuff going on here. And so, let's read this one.
Yeah.
This is from 1891. Okay, let me find it here. Now I have it. So sometimes I have to do research on an article. So based off the newspaper, you can kind of tell kind of where it was. But if it states a location, you can kind of read where it was coming from. So I came to the conclusion this is from West Virginia. It mentions an interesting find has been made on Joseph Jefferson's estate at Buzzards Bay, where the workmen dug up the skeleton of a prehistoric giant having only one eye set in the center of an enormous skull.
Oh, wow.
So I used to kind of doubt that one, but I was reading it today and I was like, well, wait a second. An enormous skull with one eye socket. I mean, sometimes you'd wonder, like, was it like, did the bridge break and it looked like one? But the way it's written, it sounds like it had one eye. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about that, but
A
it's very
cyclops.
strange. A cyclops.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. So that one's a pretty cool one, and that was in my list of interesting ones. So like when I was thinking of some of the interesting finds, it's either ones that talk about the shapes of the skulls or like what was discovered, like copper articles found with them.
Right.
Interesting things. So if you want me to, I can read some more of those.
Yeah, man. It's whatever you want to talk about. I'm gonna love every one of them. I every account is gonna be like, oh wow, for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, here's one that I like a lot. It's from France in 1929 from the Daily News of Australia. Um, okay. Prehistoric men, giant skeletons found. This is a special to the Daily News, London, December 2nd. The correspondent of the Daily Mail at Grenoble, France, says that men have unearthed 14 slate coffins dating back to prehistoric times in which skeletons of men of gigantic size were found. The skeletons were well preserved. So that was the end of that. But like, I studied ancient history for a long time before I got into this, and especially like the pathways of the Celtic peoples. And it was real interesting. The megaliths always fascinated me. And so to come across stories like this, I mean, I've seen pictures of megaliths in France that, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 stories tall. And you're like, well, how do they put these up?
Right.
That doesn't really answer the question of like, why did they put it up, but how did they do it? And then I was started coming across accounts like this, where you had these giants that were buried in France in these megalithic stone coffins.
Right.
14 of them in this count. So
Wow.
it just kind of it connects the dots
It does.
of history
Yeah.
that's been left out. Like, I mean, if you let National Geographic go on this, they're gonna show you normal sized people. They're gonna do some artwork, and they're gonna have this big dirt ramp, and they're gonna have maybe a cart that wouldn't hold the stone, and
Right.
then they're gonna pull it up somehow
Yeah.
with like 1,000 men.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's gonna work. I really don't.
Right. A hemp rope and some pulleys, right?
Yeah, how's that? I mean, because I move stones a lot. I like stones, and I build stone walls. I mean, in a 300-pound stone isn't really that big. It's
Right.
not.
No.
These stones
No.
are dense. So to see a stone that big, it takes a lot of strength.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it does. Another case in point, I have a giant stone head that my grandfather found in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's downstairs in my office. I can send you pictures of it later.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, it's not that big. You know, it might be 18 inches tall, maybe 20 inches tall, about
Yeah.
10, 12 inches wide. But it's got kind of like Asian features, you know, the way the eyes are shaped and everything. But it's a carved stone head. And it's so heavy that I have a
Yeah.
hard time bringing it upstairs to my studio area. You know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
was going to set it up here, and I'm like, I'll get it later because
So
it's heavy.
yeah. So is it something that's like prehistoric? Like a
We don't
carving?
know.
I don't know. He found it.
He found it when my mother was like 2 or 3. It's like 1957, 58. The
Yeah.
story goes that he was pulling her in a little red wagon, like perfect
Yeah.
ideal 50s picture.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he discovered this stone head in this rubble or this
Yeah.
pile of rocks or whatever off to the side, and he picked it up and put it in the wagon and had her walk so he could bring it home.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
that's
been
an
in the
awesome
family ever
story.
since. It's been in the family ever since.
Well, there were a ton of these giant mound builders in Ohio. I mean,
Yeah.
they were all over. And, they had the ability to do that. I mean, they did all kinds of artwork. And so
Right.
I wouldn't see why they wouldn't have done that.
I
you
would
know?
love it if I had something that old. That would be fantastic.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how you could tell if there's like weathering or whatnot on it, but
Yeah.
it's hard to date that type of stuff.
Well,
I'm sure there are ways if you get some experts
It
to
would-
look at it.
it would take an expert because my grandmother she took it upon herself to paint it white,
Yeah.
It put some
Oh,
red
well, hey.
lips on it at one point, and most of that has rubbed
Yeah.
off or, weathered away because it was just
Right.
kept outside for
Mhm.
decades.
Yep.
And once I got it, a few years ago, I brought it in,
Yeah. Hey,
but
we all do that sometimes. I mean, where I live, I found a lot of years ago, I found a stone and it had some strange language, like writing looking stuff on it. I was like, well, what is that? I used it for a step for a long time outside until I started studying the Celtic peoples and I realized they had ogham.
oh, wow.
Ogham is like it's just straight lines.
Yeah.
There are different types of ogham. Um, and then I started doing more research, and well, come to find out, ogham's been discovered in Oklahoma, Colorado,
Here.
West Virginia. Yes, it's been found all over the U.S. And so I was like, well, you know what? And I found multiple more stones that had that same writing on it. I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have used it as a step for so many years. So, and who's to say? Maybe different giants around North Texas might have been of some sort of Celtic. And when I say that, Celts aren't giants, and so maybe they had some of the DNA because obviously you got giants and you have regular people.
Right.
Now, obviously, giants could intermarry with regular people, and so that's where you get the mixed bloodlines. But so are they Celts? I don't necessarily. So sometimes I label 14 Celtic giants discovered. Well, I just call them that because they were in Celtic lands, building Celtic structures. The Celts said they were with them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they're not the same identical DNA because you've got a guy that's 6 foot and you got a guy that's 15, 12 foot, 10 foot. So
Yeah.
they're not identical, but they're similar. They had some sort of similar tie. So yeah, maybe some around North Texas had that.
Very well could have been.
They had that language or whatever. So
Yeah. Now, do you think
yeah,
that these Celtic giants or these Celtic region giants, would they be related? And I'm sorry if I'm jumping all over the place here, but would those be related to the red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave?
it's possible. I would say it's very possible.
Am I just stereotyping with the red hair
No,
part?
not necessarily. So, like I touched on it a little bit, like some, years ago when I was studying this, I came across a video of somebody interviewing people and they were living, like I said, in Easter Island, but they
Right.
looked like they had red hair and freckles. And so, but they said they weren't even from Ireland. It's like, well, how are they looking the same as like the people from Scandinavia and, Ireland and Scotland?
Right.
And so that goes back to they all kind of dispersed from a central location in, towards the Middle East area,
Yeah.
and they went different ways. So are the Lovelock Cave giants with the red hair, are they from Ireland? There's a good chance they're not at all, but from
Right.
a similar group of peoples that just went different directions. So you have people from Ireland they may have some of the bloodlines that came from that same location, but they just landed there instead of landing in the US. Or, I think there's been I know there's been red-haired ones in different parts of like where the Anasazi Indians were living, the cliff dwellers,
Yeah.
which isn't too far from Lovelock Cave. I believe in Kentucky too. They found like a mummy in a cave at one time, and it had like a blondish reddish tint to the hair.
Wow.
So no, that's a great question. No, I don't think it's stereotypical at all.
Okay.
Yeah, some people think, yeah, you're getting racist. I'm like, I'm not. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. And we're just talking about discoveries, right?
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Like
You
I
got to make
found a
connections where
couple.
you can.
That's all it is. Yeah, because you're trying to figure out who these people are.
Right.
Now they did intermix with other peoples of the land too, which would change their looks and
Right.
some of their genetics, which is the case down in Peru. Like they did some DNA testing on the elongated skulls, and you had some had like European, some had a European and mixed with the native culture there. Some of them originated from like the Black Sea area, which is right there where we're talking about, right there, the Caucasus Mountains. And there have been burial mounds, well, elongated skulls discovered in mounds in that region. And in that region, they call them Krugans, which are the same thing, the burial mound where they buried their kings and queens. So, yeah, it's just fascinating to try to connect the dots and follow the trails of these peoples where they went.
Yeah. When you get into the Paracas, those elongated skulls, that's something wild, man, because it's not like they're condensing and stretching the skull.
You're right.
They have more cranial they got more
like
capacity,
mass.
right? Yeah, they got more mass in there. They got more room for a bigger brain kind of thing in there, right? So it's not like they're condensing and stretching. It's just bigger, and the orbital sockets are bigger.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that kind of you can tell that is not cradle headboarding. That's genetics.
Yes.
And that's my personal belief where cradle boarding comes from is people who want to emulate those people.
Right.
Whatever they liked them. Maybe they were doing some cool stuff. People looked up to them, and so they wanted to be like it.
Yeah, they were revered, right?
Right. There you go.
For a reason.
Right.
So, okay. I know I asked you to get some stories together, but I gotta ask about these Paracas skulls.
Yeah.
Where do you think their origin is? Because if you look at the History Channel, it's going to go ancient alien kind of suspicion.
Yeah, no. Okay, I think their origin is like the DNA pointed back towards the Black Sea area.
Okay.
Which is right north of Assyria and right north of the biblical land.
Right.
So I think it's just Nephilim. I think it's a Nephilim trait, a Nephilim DNA trait, whether or not they were really tall. And I don't know if all of them were very tall down there. I haven't heard. I've come across accounts of giants in Peru. Now, were the ones with those elongated skulls actual giants, or had it been like, I don't know what word to use, muddied down enough to where they weren't massively tall, but still had the traits?
Right.
You're not going to get rid of all the traits.
No.
It's just there's always going to be some there. So that's my take on it. That they are the angelic, Nephilim DNA traits.
Right. Why hasn't that been buried yet by the Smithsonian Institute? Is it just that is the cat's out of the bag on that one, or
maybe because it's down there? I don't know.
Good point.
I don't know. I mean, it seemed like way back in the day when I was looking into it, I had come across an article somewhere, or maybe it's somebody's comment. You get on these threads and you're digging. Somebody mentioned that there was a museum where they had a couple 8-foot giants down there, not far. You had the Paracas, and there's some other areas down there that had these strange skulls, and it was in one of those areas. The Nazca people. Okay, so they're similar to the Paracas people in appearance. If I remember correctly, they had similar, and then some of them even had reddish hair on some of those mummies. So why did those, if they really were on display, why did they go away?
Right.
It may be just like it's becoming more popular, being talked about in the U.S. maybe, and there might have been some pressure put on them because there's a lot of people from the U.S. down there studying this stuff because they can't hear.
Yeah, good point.
So I don't know. That may be a reason why some of it's not talked about, but and why some of it can be talked about because it's down there. So yeah, that's fascinating. That's always fascinated me.
Yeah, me too. I feel like if I talk about it to most people, not on the show, like if I turn to my family and talk about the Paracas skulls and the possibilities of it being something other than human or pure human.
Yeah.
the conversation is going to end with my statement. It's not
Yeah.
it's not going to go anywhere. So I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about it
Yeah.
at all with you.
Yeah. While we're talking about it, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think as Marzulli talked about the possibility that they might have been nocturnal because of the size of their eye sockets, which I thought was fascinating. I'd never heard that before.
That makes sense too.
Maybe they had lived underground, and they, maybe because they were different.
Right.
So, and there's always these legends or these wonderings if do giants live under the ground? Or did they live under the ground? Or so, I mean, if they were nocturnal or had that ability, maybe they did some just to stay, from being wiped out or exterminated by other peoples.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, that could work. There's all kinds of talk about giants that live in the cave systems, like the Mammoth Cave system under Kentucky and stuff, because that goes out. I think it touches under a couple of other states even.
Oh, wow.
It's huge out there.
Goodness.
All right. Sorry for the tangent and for dragging you from one spot to the next, man.
No, I enjoy it. It seems like we're able to touch on something every place we go. So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just love picking your brain. Okay. What are some of your top accounts? Some of the things that stood out to you over the years of research that you don't, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. Let me read this one. This one it's from France too. Okay. Now this one is really fascinating. I mean, I loved reading this one because it was so cool. This is Stone Age. This is from 1927, the report, Evening Star, which Evening Star was from what I understand, was a newspaper in Washington, D.C. Doesn't exist anymore, as far as I'm aware. 15 giants were found. And it's kind of a long article, so I won't read through all of it. But basically, well, there were some mines. So let's read about these mines. It is known that many of the mines in the Stone Age were worked by the Romans, and that the Romans miners did nothing but continue the work begun by the Gauls. And so to let the audience know, the Gauls were what we call the Celts. So there were different tribes of Celts. So you had the Gauls in France, you had the Gaels in Ireland, the Gaelic in Scotland, you had Galatia, which is Turkey, modern day. Those are the Galatians. And then you had the Helvetii. You had all these different tribal names. So Gauls were just a huge group of them in modern day France.
Wow. Okay.
So, and that's where tons of megaliths are. But one reason that the Romans did take over the land is because all these Gauls and Celts had tons of mines where they were extracting different ores. They were extracting gold, and Julius Caesar wanted it. Of course, he wrote the history, so you don't learn about this stuff because he actually conquered them. He tricked them and conquered them because he was organized and they were a bunch of tribes. Yeah. So that's how that went. It wasn't a fun story, but so anyway, these Gauls made these deep, and the way they did these mines, they made shafts instead of like diagonal. They would go straight down. So, let's see, let me cut to the chase here. Okay, the arrangement of these primitive shafts may be planned to make it easy for overseers of the mines to watch as slaves, they're assuming slaves, as they worked, and also to prevent the entrance of wild beasts. So they're surmising, like, why did they go straight down? We don't know that, but they did that. That the mines were worked in prehistoric times was demonstrated by the discovery of 15 skeletons of men who presumably were killed in a cave-in. So here you have it. So you picture this mine going straight down, and it had caved in. And so you had all these stones, and it buried them alive. There's 15 of them down there. In their hands were very heavy tools, hatchets made of stone, and picks carved from the bones of animals. The skeletons were of great height and of powerful structure. The thumbs of the enormous hands were twice the length of the thumb of the modern workman. But though so tall, the men were of excessively narrow build, as was shown by the width of the places where they worked. So you had 15 men that were like giants. I mean, a thumb, double the size of my thumb. So that's going to be like, I don't know, close to 6 inches long.
Yeah.
That's pretty big.
That's enormous.
And their bone structure was massive.
Yeah.
So there were giants down in these shafts, and they were extracting the metal with big stone hammers and hatchets and bone tools. I imagine they were just smacking it with the stone hammers and picking at it with the bones. Right. So that one was a really cool account.
That is a cool, because they found 15
of them down there. Yeah.
Wow.
All of massive proportions. Obviously, probably not all the exact height, but they're all huge.
Right.
So that one's cool because you had a lot of details. You had their stone tools, how big their hands were, how they were working, what they were doing, where they lived. They lived in the same area where all these megalithic structures are that are massive, weigh tons. So that's one of my favorite ones.
That's a good one. It's like an
let's see.
Mining accident. That's wild.
Yeah. Here's another one of my top ones. This one's in Louisiana, which I like this one because it's the state right next to me.
Yeah, it's close to home.
It's close to home. This one's interesting. 1912, fine giant skeletons. In life, they average 12 feet in height, which is pretty big. I mean, when you find a lot of these reports, they're 7 foot, 8 foot, 9 foot sometimes. These are all around 12 feet tall. Okay, Louisiana. Skeletons of a race of giants who average 12 feet in height were found by workmen engaged on a drainage project at Crowville near here. There are several score, at least, of the skeletons, and they lie in various positions. It is believed that they were killed in a prehistoric fight and that the bodies lay where they fell until covered by alluvial deposits due to the flooding of the Mississippi River. No weapons of any sort were found, and it's believed that the Titans must have struggled with wooden clubs. The skulls are in perfect state of preservation and some of the jawbones are large enough to fit around a baby's body.
Wow.
Good grief. So you had several score, it says, and they all were right around, give or take, 12 feet tall. So
that's a whole tribe.
Yeah. And they weren't buried. They were like almost buried by flooding of the Mississippi River, which is fascinating. So they lived up and down the riverways. They used those to navigate. Maybe they fought with other giants. Not sure. I mean, there are Indian lore and legends of different tribes of giants fighting each other.
And that's old French country too. So there's
right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so much history.
Yeah, man. It's like everything ties together.
Yeah. Let's see here. Got some cliff dweller giants. Okay, so this is New Mexico, 1912. Party discovered over 100 graves with skeletons of human beings in them. That's the title. Special correspondence to the Morning Journal, Deming, New Mexico, May 29th. County Surveyor Edward Carter and his corps of assistants, while at their work on the Membrees River, about 40 miles from Deming, a few days ago, found what is undoubtedly an old Indian burial ground. The party found a group or more than 100 graves. They dug up several graves, and in each one of them was found a skeleton of a human being. The graves were found to be lined with large cobblestones. Sorry, it's hard to read these. articles. So it's like some of these words, like when they're typed, they bled a little bit, and they're a little blurry. So the bottom of the graves averaged about 3 feet from the surface of the earth. The bones found were in a position that led the men to believe the Indians must have been about 8 feet in height. They were in a sitting posture and had a fire clay bowl over their heads. Both the bowls and bones crumbled to dust shortly after they were exposed to the air. The skulls and jawbones are more than the average size, and the teeth were nearly as large as the teeth of a horse. So they found beads and other things with them. So horses' teeth, basically, and huge jaws. They assumed they were about 8 feet tall because once they made contact with the air, they just kind of crumbled. So they couldn't put a tape measure on them, but just by the proportions of probably the knees and the legs and the size of these individuals.
Yeah.
So
massive.
They opened a few of them, but they said there was about 100 graves there. So did they go back? Did they keep digging? I mean, who knows? We just get to see a little window of it right here, which is pretty fascinating.
That is. These are fantastic accounts, man.
Yeah,
And you touched on them in Kentucky, Tennessee, New Mexico, Louisiana. They're everywhere.
Yeah,
they
cover
really
the whole, are.
Yeah, they cover the whole U.S. I've heard of megalithic structures in Montana.
Oh,
People
yeah.
talk about these giant wall structures and stuff about in the mountains of Montana.
I really want to go there.
Yeah,
and check that out. I've heard that it's getting, once it's got some publicity, there's a little bit of pushback.
Really?
On that, yeah. Like,
wow.
The lady who really kind of, fronts that and does the research and brought it to light. I think her name is Julie Ryder. I was looking into it, a few months ago, and she was writing about like they're threatening to close that part of the mountains, and they may do A, B, and C up there. And she's thinking, well, they're just doing it so she doesn't go up there and document it anymore. So when they start doing that, then she's on to something.
Yeah, for sure.
But they're fascinating. I'm sure you've seen pictures of them. Well,
I've only heard of them from a guy that I've talked to through the show. Pretty much since the start of the show. He invited me. He said, you should come up to Montana. I can take you to some of these places.
Oh, yeah.
And I had never even heard of Julie Ryder. I'm gonna have to look her up.
Yeah, look her up. Yeah, you'll see her pictures. She'll be taking pictures in front of them, and so you can kind of see the size of it. Man, some of them, I think it's called the Tizer Dolmen. It's unbelievable tall.
Really?
I don't understand, and it didn't get there by itself. Right. I mean, stones don't end up being 2 tall pillar stones with a capstone on top of it, and we're talking super tall. Yeah. I don't want to quote any sizes, but I don't know. I'm not going to say any sizes because I may botch it, but it's massive, really tall.
I'll definitely check that out. Yeah.
So they were all up in there.
And to talk about pushback, I got a fun little anecdotal story. If you have a minute.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if you've heard the podcast. It's called Sword and Staff Podcast.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
I've worked with those guys quite a bit, back and forth, and we're working on a series. It might have to take a break. They got a lot of stuff going on in their life. Yeah. But we're working on a series called Shadow Appalachia.
Yeah.
And the first thing we did was we went to this. Well, we went looking for and discovered it, a serpent mound on the ridge of this mountain here locally, like in our county. Because the guys from Sword and Staff, they live like 5 minutes away from me. We didn't know it till like a year ago.
Oh, wow.
So we go out there, we find this serpent mound. There is a newspaper article about it in like I think the 70s.
Okay.
It was never mentioned again.
Yeah.
It was in an old book from like the 50s or 60s talking about a tour being available. If someone wanted to go, they would take them. No markers, no plaques, as far as I know, no road to it. Like we took an old coal mine belt road,
Yeah,
went up there and
because you had to
we
get back in the woods.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
way back. But we found this place. Well, Josh from Sword and Staff, he was a member of the West Virginia Geological Society or something like that. So he gets on their Facebook page and throws a couple of the pictures up. Look what we just, look what we found. This hasn't been talked about in 50 years. We found it.
Yeah.
They took his pictures down, sent him a pretty strongly worded letter about, you need to just let this go and don't push this. And then kicked him out of the out of the group. And he was like a paid member, in the state group, just gave
You're
him
only
the boot.
allowed. Golly. Well, that's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, they should be excited.
Yeah, you would think. Yeah. We were pumped, but we got it all on video and stuff. Like we're going to share that hopefully this fall.
Well, how many places like that are there? There's got to be so many.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because it doesn't take long for the earth to, trees and stuff to overgrow all that stuff, all those places. Yeah. There's got to be, tons of those places across the U.S.
Oh, there has to be. And what's crazy, that it's cool that you mentioned that. I was talking about this to one of my good friends, and he is into metal detecting, like big time.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so he started sending me pictures. He said, "What is this the place you found?" Because me and my friend found this also, but we just never told anybody. Totally different location, totally different mound. But
oh wow.
Yeah, and this one actually had like the head was carved into, like you could see the eyes and the mouth of this structure.
Oh, okay. So you got to tell me about that. What's it made out of? Is it earth and stone?
Yes.
Or both?
Yeah, it seems to be mainly stone, and I think it's limestone.
Okay.
I can send you pictures.
That's awesome.
He
awesome. He discovered another one.
Yeah, and it's the same area. Like it may be on like a neighboring ridge. It might be on the same mountain. I'm not sure.
Obviously they lived right
recent.
Around there.
Yeah, yeah. So
man,
we're pumped about it.
There, man.
We're trying to get back out there and check it out. It's just some people don't like to talk about where exactly things are.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, you shouldn't really. I mean, because I don't know. And when I say you shouldn't, I'm not saying you shouldn't talk about it. Right. So like, unless you want somebody to go destroy it, start giving locations away and stuff like that. Then you can document and all that stuff and still have it protected and talked about.
Exactly.
Like I don't well, that megalith that I found, I don't tell people where it is, just because it's just a place I go visit on hikes and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. I mean, the stone is tons. It weighs tons. But yeah, no, that is awesome. Yeah. I mean, because my sister, lives in Virginia, so it's not too far from West Virginia, and it's just beautiful out there. It probably looks about the same, the Appalachians there.
Yeah, it's all the same. I will definitely send you some pictures. I'll send you a stack of pictures, man. These structures that we found in the Stonehead, and get your take on all that.
Oh yeah, sure. And was it Moundsville, West Virginia? There was there is a massive mound there.
Oh yeah.
And supposedly there were found giant skeletons in that mound.
Yep.
And not too far in the distant past, from what I understand, there used to be about an 8-foot skeleton on display, down in when they had like a little museum down in the bottom of it. But it's not there anymore, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
So
we don't have any skeletons.
No, not anymore.
Tons of mounds, man. Downtown Charleston, like our state capital.
Yeah.
Downtown, there's a big mound. There's a big mound with plaques, and they just got like a little, boardwalk going around it, and they just call them the Adena people, and
there you go.
And not a whole lot more detail.
Yeah, no more details than that. But just like I'm glad that they do preserve some of them.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite ones are in Pinson, Tennessee. And I need to go back there again. There are a ton of mounds there, and it's right along a river. There's burial mounds. There's tons of temple mounds, different heights. So like And these guys knew their stuff, like as far as like when the solstice was going to be and where it was going to rise, the sun, or where it was going to set. They knew the cardinal lines of north, south, east, west. They aligned the corners of each of their mounds in such a way to where it was just perfect. But a lot of the mound complexes are like that. And if you looked into it, you probably discover the same thing with those serpent mounds.
Yeah. They actually do kind of align with, I don't know if it's going to be like a solstice,
yeah,
or something like that, but they do have like a east-west bearing kind of thing going on.
Makes you want to go back in time and just hang out with some of those guys for, a week.
Yeah, as long as I'm not on the sacrificial altar or something.
Well, yeah, you know what? Yeah, you got a point there. Because I did uncover, and I don't have that one in front of me, but I did uncover an article about a mound. It had a bunch of giants in it, but at the end of the mound was like a 12-foot long stone altar, an altar stone.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I'd ever come across anything like that.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember what state it was in, but it was in the U.S. But yeah, you're right. Good point. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe just a time machine and just kind of hover over it all,
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be one of those, we'd love to have you for dinner kind of conversations.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Well, Travis, is there anything you wanted to hit on that I didn't give you a chance to say? Because I know I talked all through this, man. I'm sorry.
No, man, I enjoyed it. I mean, this has been good. I wanted to show you so like in this area where the megalith was found, as I'm walking around, I've noticed tons of like stone tools, just kind of laying around. What? So, and I found this one that looks a whole lot like an axe head, and I can show it to you. It's got to be about 10 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
So it's obviously been shaped. It's polished here and it's notched here. The backside is a little more rough, but it's also been shaped, and it's got all the pit holes in it where they've worked it.
Yeah.
And it's 15 inches long, and it's really heavy.
Wow.
And so and I found a lot of these axe heads. I found some that are 9 inches, some that are 13 inches. And they all are very similar in design. And I did some research in this north central Texas area. They've been discovered, and they look a lot like this. They don't look like the ones in the north where they were making them out of they would make them out of granite stone. So the granite stone, and then they would get this perfect notch around it. So I've got some pushback when I post a picture of this. Oh, that's not an artifact. That's not a stone tool. It's like, what do you know? Wait, really? So what these guys were doing is this stone is made out, it's like a limestone, similar to limestone. So you can't really go notch at it real hard because you might destroy it. Yeah. You've got a granite stone, you can notch the tar out of that thing, and it's going to be fine. Sandstones are, a little bit more brittle, but this thing is heavy. I haven't weighed it, but I'm guessing it's about 10 pounds, maybe more.
Wow.
So that just goes, you got a megalithic structure, you have massive stone axes.
Yes.
So who built these things, right? And people say, well, these stone tools are ceremonial. Well, why in the hundreds then? Why in the hundreds or more? There's a museum in Missouri that's built by the guy who started Bass Pro. And in the basement, he has tons and tons of stone tools that he's collected. And there are massive, massive stone tools, 10-inch, 9-inch, really tall. Yeah. You can't even wield that. That's way too heavy to wield.
Oh, yeah. Could you imagine trying to swing that?
Oh, no.
Throw your back out, man.
Yeah. And it took a lot of work to make the thing. And a lot of these are like granite type stones. And so just think of how heavy that is.
Right.
So, yeah, that's a good place to go, and check out some real stone artifacts, from giants.
What's that guy's last? His last name is Morris, right?
I'm not real sure. I think that's
Pro.
right. Yeah, but he's got a great museum there right outside of Branson, Missouri.
I'll check it out.
Check it out.
I'll add more notes. I've been writing notes the whole time, man. So
Yeah, there you go.
I got tons of notes to check out now. I appreciate you, Travis. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I always enjoy it.
Yeah, man. Hopefully we can get you back on here soon. And
Sure.
I would like to showcase anything you want. You know, like you got so much research, and knowing that you're out there actually in the field doing field research too, and finding these stone tools, that blows my mind. I'm so like,
well, I've got an eye for it. I'm looking for it.
Yeah,
you
man.
know, I'm searching.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. I enjoy it.
That's a blessing. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. I wish you the best of luck. Stay in touch. I'm going to send you a stack of pictures here in just a few minutes.
Okay. Awesome.
Man, thanks so much.
Yeah, Godspeed, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. God bless.
Enjoyed it. All right, you too.
You.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.